This is our second event, and I can barely believe that we actually have Happy Oasis with us tonight. Yeah. And Happy is the founder and chief visionary officer to Raw Spirit Festival, author of several books, and she's got so much to share and has told me several different topics that she may be speaking about tonight, and I'm not sure which it's going to end up being, but every time she started telling me about one, it was amazing, so it doesn't even matter. It's going to be great. She's also brought a couple of friends with her, so it's going to be, who knows what's going to happen. There's music, there's group participation. It's just going to be a blast. So I'm just going to hand the microphone over to Happy Oasis. Thank you.
Shea Baird is an extraordinary individual. I just found out today a little bit about her, and she is she's the Chief Visionary Officer of this Monday night series, and I'm so grateful to be here with her. So let's give Shea a round of applause. A lot of you have heard about this talk on the radio interview, apparently on the interview of actually Shea's website. So there's a few people I know in the audience. So I'm thinking that it's probably best that I deliver what I said I was going to talk about on that show yesterday in Honolulu Airport. Wow. And we finally got together and I just said, all right, I'm going to speak about all these stories about plants, because I used to be an anthropologist, a cultural adventure anthropologist, and I was mostly raw and mostly vegetarian, but I must say that for someone who claims to be a vegetarian since the age of about 14, I've eaten an awful lot of bugs, and I've eaten an awful lot of animals that I can't even describe when I was living with these various people, things that are like half snake and half lizard and like half iguana, and you're just not quite sure what exactly it is, from caterpillars to, I've got to say, ant eggs were delicious, and excuse me for talking about that here, but it's been a long time since I lived with those tribal people, and it's been many years since I've been pretty much raw vegan, for about 15 years, and some of the stories that I was going to tell about, I was just reminded about antidepressants. I just read at the new year that about 18% of Americans, and America is a new country to me because I've been overseas for a long period of time, about 18% of our beloved country women and men are on antidepressants. That's a lot of people. We're talking about 1 out of 5 people, and those antidepressants also include sleeping pills. So I'm sure everybody here knows somebody who's been on sleeping pills or sleeping medication, and basically lack of sleep or inability to sleep at night is considered a symptom of depression. So, do you know what is the traditional way that Tibetans learned as the quickest means for antidepressing ourselves? It's actually in the word itself. And what the people who lived for millions of years used to do, well, Tibetans, we all know about the Tibetan rites, correct? Someone was just talking to me, and they make you feel really good. Well, my Tibetan friends told me when I was high up in the Himalayas, we never do the Tibetan rites. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, you do this, right? You're Tibetan. He's like, no, nobody does that. I said, well, what do you do if you want to get fit? And he said, it is so cold. We jump like a frog. And I said, where did you get that from? He said, well, I think we learned it from frogs. So they said that if you jump up and down 17 times, it will not only warm up your whole body, but it's also a great counter to any form of depression. And I know that weather has been exceptionally balmy and sunny, and I just flew back from Hawaii last night. And when I arrived, I felt like, wait a minute, double take, I'm still in Hawaii. But it's going to come back in a couple days, possibly, so you've still got a little bit of winter left. So just remember, when it really starts pouring for days, just start jumping like a frog, because think about it, what do frogs do when it rains? Right? They know, right? And not only that, if you're not into that posture in particular, then you can go back even further. And this is what I do. My gurus, my sadhus, I do have religious spiritual paths, and some of my main gurus are frogs, and I wanted to tell you that one of them is actually the lizard people, because lizards, they do push-ups. That's what? That's an antidepressant. Could you imagine if you go to the pharmacy, people fill up their bottles of whatever it is that they take that I can't pronounce, and the pharmacist says, no, your prescription is just do like 25 push-ups every day, and then jump. And I gotta say, a third one that I would add would be skipping. So we all know that skipping is it. It's totally in. It's back in style. And then if you really want to get down and get really happy, these are some of my own, secrets, is that you crawl. Like, when's the last time you crawled on grass and you just crawl around? And not only do you crawl around, but then you crawl with a friend. And then you play tumble cards. So you like knock over each other and, tickle each other. And anyway, those are some of the, if I were a pharmacist, this is the first time I've ever actually talked about the subject, but this is what I do. I just freeform. So I did say that I was going to talk about plants. And plants are some of my favorite people. They've taught me a lot. I spent, if you could kind of guess, even though I'm the founder of this festival, which is very people-oriented, I spent an awful lot of time alone. And some people say too much time, if you know what I mean. So some of the people that I would speak with every day, not verbally necessarily, is plants. And after I lived in my fire lookout tower 6 months a year, not in solitary confinement, I prefer to say solitary refinement. We'll see if that's true or not. But anyway, I was out there for 12 6-month seasons. That's 6 years in solitary refinement. So I did learn how to relate with other species and befriend clouds. I would invite clouds in for lunch and, whoever. And then I finally realized that love is actually in the very air, that like the whole peace vibe, like it's absolutely everywhere. And we can just, take that in at any moment, at any time of day or night, because it's what permeates existence. So that was very liberating when I realized, my goodness, I'd never have to feel lonely again. This is such a great thing, especially now that I'm the founder of this festival. So these plants, just to give you a few ideas of what they taught me. I'm going to be teaching a class in Hawaii next week. Come join us at David Wolf, Nick Good, Samantha, Bruce Horowitz. We're doing a permaculture retreat on the Big Island. And so this is a little hint of what I'll be talking about in much greater depth there. So some of the things I learned are, for example, poison oak. I'm sure you know this. I'm going to mention this one first, just to warm you up, because I'm sure you're familiar with this. One time I was living in the Redwoods in Santa Cruz, and my sweetheart and I had a tickle fight, and we fell off the deck of his redwood hunting house. He wasn't a hunter, he was a gardener, but we fell off, and we tumbled into poison oak. And we both ended up in the hospital. But the bad news was that my relationship with poison oak had been extremely compromised, because I moved to this place. I had a dream. I follow my dream, like Martin Luther King. How perfect. So I always live my life. I dream, and then I proceed from the dream outward. And this time I had this dream to move to the Redwoods. And when I finally, at the end of this dream, I looked into this cab over camper, that they put on a pickup truck, and I floated down. I went down the coast from Vancouver in my dream, and I floated down, and I looked inside this cab over camper, and there, to my surprise, was me. So I realized, my goodness, I'm going to move to this place. And sure enough, I moved there, and the place was called Poison Oak Farm. So I moved to Poison Oak Farm, and my job was to cut wood by hand. They didn't want any electricity, and they said, we just want you to, kind of guard our large property, live by the spring in paradise, and just cut a little bit of firewood, and we'll call it even. Well, after I had cut all their winter firewood, I was a little bit too speedy for my own good. They said, we'd like you to, now that you've been here for 3 months, and you're obviously attached to our land, I'm adding that on, then we'd like for you to cut all the poison oak off of Poison Oak Farm. And I was like, it was daunting and it was petrifying. And I said, no, I can't do it. They said, well, you can leave then. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I put on a mask and gloves and long sleeve shirt and pants, and I went out. And every day for maybe, I think it was a half hour, it was my exchange program for them, I just went out and killed poison oak and rooted it up and had to burn it. And we all know what that does to your lungs. And so it was right after I had done that for about 2 months when my sweetheart and I tumbled into a huge patch of poison oak, and I ended up in the hospital. Well, he got out before I did. And basically after that, I was afraid to go anywhere near Poison Oak, which meant I could no longer live in the Redwoods.